Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
We lost most of the audience. I'm going to reread Article 1. I'm going to ask that the motion be remade, reseconded, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Article 1, to hear the reports of the Rockingham Town School District officers for the last year and to take action thereon. Do we have a motion?
I move to hear the reports of the Rockingham Town School District officers for the last year and to take action thereon.
Do we have a second? All right. So moved and seconded to hear the reports of the Rockingham Town School District officers for the last year and to take action thereon. Is there discussion on Article 1? Yes. Mr. Lambert.
I've noted that the annual school report for this year is very thin, and it's been getting thinner, I think, each year. I think the voters need to get some more information than what's provided. Among the information that they need to have is, the big one, of course, is what's the impact of the pandemic on education in Rockingham this year? How many students do you have in person as opposed to kids that are homeschooled or doing remote learning? I'd also like a justification for why Rockingham is not back in school in person 5 days a week. 7th and 8th graders, I understand, only go 2 days a week. We are one of the lightest affected in the state for COVID infections. Yet there are 30% of the schools in the state are back 5 days a week, including many counties that have a higher rate of COVID. So I think the voters deserve some of this information. Thank you.
Do any school board members wish to address Mr. Lambert's questions?
Yeah, I'll speak to a little bit. The impact of education, and I'm sure superintendent and others could speak more appropriately than me, but yeah, I mean, you're not going to school full time, that's going to have an impact. I think they've done the best they could with the schedule that they have, but you know, I don't think any of us up here disagree that we'd rather see them in there full time. As far as some of the items that you mentioned not being in a report, maybe that's my fault, experience. I'm not sure, but how many students we have? We do have those numbers. We can certainly offer those now if you'd like. Yeah, Bellows Falls Middle School, we have 232. 36 of those are enrolled in the VTLC, VTVLC, online learning. Why is it that? Oh, yeah. Central Elementary, 144 enrolled. 20 of those are in VTLC, so 124 in person. Saxons River, 77 enrolled, and 7 of those students are in VTLC, so 70 in person, for a total of 390 students in person. 7th and 8th grade, I know they're going to be getting back to a little bit extra time coming up here, I believe the 15th. again, I think probably Mr. Pratt could speak better to that, the details of that, but you know, there's some progress being made, whether it be slow. It's just where we're at.
All right, I see Mr. McAuliffe has his hand up. Pat, can you admit Jim McAuliffe?
Can you hear me?
We can, Jim.
Okay. Well, my question is, where is the report? I didn't see a report in the annual booklet. I haven't seen any financials for the budget. Where is the report?
I haven't holding a copy right now. There were some here. I assume there were some at the central office. I'm not sure about distribution otherwise.
You're not sure about the distribution.
There were not as many printed this year, I understand, as there has been previously, because they had to throw a lot out in previous years. I picked up mine at the central office. I didn't see many out tonight, but I do know that there were a few out in the entranceway tonight.
So in a COVID world, that's not very effective, is it?
I know that in the report, it includes the letters, the letter from our chair, the letter from our principals. It does give the expense stuff. The revenues were not included in this year's count. It does give the comparison page that has to go back to the AOE. Jigs, do you have any questions on any of those things that we can help you with?
Yes, I'd like to know what the budget is compared to last year.
Go ahead.
I want to know what the proposed impact would be on tax rate.
Okay, the budget last year was $10,888,771.78. This year, we put a budget in of $10,725,451.64. It is down 1.5% from last year. The per equalized student is down 3.42% less than spending for our current year.
So what's the cost per pupil?
That I do, the cost.
I think I'm going to interrupt for a second.
Go
I think
ahead.
we're getting ahead of ourselves because those are speaking to Article 3.
Yes.
So I'm certain that we'll get there at that.
Well, when you don't have a report, it's pretty hard to look at that. So
Yep.
whether it's in section 3 or section 1, if you haven't distributed reports, pretty hard to see.
Understood. That's why I was bringing it up. Sir.
So Jim, I just had a chat message come in that the report is available on the website. If you're online, you can go to the school website and at least have a digital copy during this meeting.
Well, I'm on with you, Ray. So
I understand that. So I think you've made your point, Jim. I'm going to move on to Chris Pratt, the superintendent.
Thank you. Chris Pratt, Superintendent of Schools. Just to go back to some of the former questions, and before I get into Mr. McAuliffe's question, is that the impact on, what's the impact of spending have in regards to education and COVID? We've been working a lot with grants this year. So the impact to taxpayers in regards to this COVID recovery is very minimal because we've had various grants come out from federal and state. We're currently working with the ESSER 1 grants and the ESSER 2 grants, which directly deal with student learning and recovery. I think the bigger impact that we may be seeing is the social, emotionally, and the academic impact. From what we can see right now, just from the local assessments, we're not seeing a huge a huge impact on learning, but that's not to say it's not there. So we will have a recovery plan in place for that. As far as the town reports, they've been posted on the SU website for some time now, the town reports. So people could print them off themselves. We did have copies made up and brought down to the Opera House for the people who would be there as well. We just didn't do as many this year because it's really been a digital process in regards to trying to get the information out to people. The reports do look different. We're working with a new report system that the state mandated report system. So the reports look a lot different, but the information, it wasn't out there in paper form as it has been in the past because we're using the digital aspect of it. So, that's, what I can tell you about what we have so far. We do, if you have questions on the budget, tonight would be the time to ask that.
Thank you, Chris. I don't see any other hands raised. How about my monitor doing?
Oh, no.
Pat, is there anybody else in the waiting room? All right. Is there any further discussion on Article 1? In that case, we'll move to the vote. Motion's been made and seconded to accept the reports of the Rockingham Town School District officers for the last year and to take action thereon. All in favor, say aye. And if you're on Zoom, if you could use the hand function or raise your hand visually. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say no.
No.
This is going to be interesting. We have at least 3 no votes in the House here. I heard 2 or 3 yes votes. If you're voting yes remotely, again, put your hand up, and I'm going to scroll through and see who I can find. And I'm going to see if I can identify people. I see Jim McAuliffe. I see Stan.
I didn't vote for.
I understand that.
Okay.
I'm just trying to identify people. Right now, I'm looking for, on Zoom, raise your hand and you're using your icon if you're voting yes on Article 1. And I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'm counting yes, yes, 8 votes on Zoom. If you're voting nay on Article 1, please raise your hand. See, 1, 2, 3. And I see 3 nay votes on Zoom, and the ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The motion is carried. And moving on to Article 2, this is for discussion only. And we don't need a motion, but to see if the Rockingham Town School District will apply the sum of $40,652 from the fiscal year 2020 fund balance to create a reserve to be used for capital improvements at the Rockingham schools and authorize the board to expend said funds. Is there discussion on Article 2? Mr. Lambert.
I think I'd like a little more information on this before I vote on it. Number one, how much money is currently in the capital reserve fund? And why do we need $42,000 more, recognizing that if we don't put it in the capital reserve fund, it'll be used to reduce taxes? So what's the balance now? Why do we need 42?
And do we have a board member who can address that? If not, I will ask Mr. Pratt.
Go ahead. We have currently $179,348. However, we also have $300,000 from fiscal year 18 that needs to be put in that fund if it was not put in there, and we have $100,000 from fiscal year 19 that needed to go in there. So that would make it a total of $579,348. The capital reserve fund is used for large projects that might come up. We put off the auditorium at the middle school that we were going to put money in. We were going to use from the capital reserve fund for that, plus also the stuff that is put in the budget each year, because there is money that is put in the budget that goes for capital projects. Or capital improvement. It's called a capital project in the budget. The capital reserve fund is totally separate from that, and that's something that has been set aside and voted to be put in that fund. So that's where that money is. We decided that $40,652 would raise it a little bit so that we had funds. We do have some things that we know are probably going to come up, such as the boiler at Saxon River School and at Central School. Although some of that can be offset with grant money, but if it ends up being large projects, we felt that there should be some money in there. I think we were not possibly quite as aware that we had quite as much as we do have, but still used the $40,652 is only a small part of the surplus that we have available to use for next year. And so saving some of that money for that, with the fact that our budget has gone down this year by 1.5%, plus the fact that we have quite a lot of surplus to put towards the budget, we felt that was a fair amount. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or discussion on Article 2? Jim McAuliffe.
Yes, what was the budget surplus for 2020?
So, Mr. McCullough, the carryover for this, from FY20 is about 500,000. The total is about 545,510, yeah. So the remainder, about 500,000 will go back to the general fund to ease the tax burden.
You're applying 500,000 of the surplus to the to offset this current budget.
Jigs, what George talked about was the surplus from 2020. There was a surplus, but there was also a $500,000 surplus that had been that was to be put towards the 2020 budget. That was unused money. So if you add those together, you end up with $1,045,510. We also have to take into account that the taxpayers voted $171,688.13 for a fiscal year 22 offset of expenditures. So that money that is available would be $1,217,077.74. And then you would have to subtract that $40,652 from that.
Well, my question is, how much of the surplus are you applying against this year's budget to reduce the taxes.
Okay, that's the $1,217,077.74 minus $40,652. And I hadn't done that, so I'm doing it right now. I'll give you the answer in a minute. 4 borrowed, 6. $1,176,425.74 should be what is available for that.
So your budget's 10,700,000, but you're not going to collect all that from taxes. Is that what you're saying? You're going to apply that?
Yes, absolutely.
Jim, I'm going to leave you and switch over to Chris Pratt.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like Flora Pagan, our business administrator, to speak on this a little bit as well. Flora, if that's okay.
Yes. Hi, good evening. So right now what we have allocated to offset expenses for FY22 will be $171,688. That's the amount that we have right now of the surplus that will be offset for FY22. As well, we do have another $100,000 that was previously approved that will be for FY23 to offset expenditures. The overall surplus, it is the $545,510 that Mr. Smith had mentioned. But from that amount of surplus from FY20, we do have to take into consideration different projects that we have pending. As well, they didn't mention that from the $40,000 that they are taking into consideration for capital projects, we were audited all the playgrounds, and the playgrounds need to be upgraded for the spring, so that way they could be used. So we need to take into consideration that we would need funds. We might have some grants that will cover some of the expenses to update and put the playgrounds up to speed so the kids could use them in the spring. But at the moment, that doesn't mean that it will be covered 100%. So right now, the offset amount, it is just $171,688. That's for FY22.
And these expenditures you're talking about for the playgrounds, it's not in the budget.
It is part of the amount that we're asking to put in reserve for capital projects. It is included in the $40,000 extra that we are asking to have as capital project amounts, which is on the Article 2. They mentioned the $40,652.
And that's coming out of the 2021 budget surplus?
That will be into consideration the surplus amount that we have, yes.
That's the total amount of the surplus for fiscal 21.
For fiscal 20. We are still working on fiscal 21. The surplus is from fiscal 20. Fiscal 21 is the current year that we are working. You won't see surplus for FY21 till next year. So
okay.
the surplus is FY20.
So to sum up, you've got 500 and something in your reserve.
$545,000, yeah.
And you want to add 42.
No, we're not adding. We are putting into capital reserve $40,652.
Into capital reserve from the other reserve.
Exactly, extra.
And how much is in the capital reserve?
So currently unused from the capital reserve, we have $140,000, but we do have projects that we're working on that are not finalized. Like they mentioned already, we do have 2 boiler rooms that it needs to be updated. As well, we're working on some for Saxon River window films, some shades for the classrooms, and other projects that right now they have, but some of those projects as well, we have some grant money that will cover a 75% of it, but the other 25% we will have to cover.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any further discussion under Article 2? All right, hearing none, we will move on to Article 3. This is the budget article we'll be voting on tomorrow by Australian ballot. Shall the voters of the Rockingham Town School District approve the school board to expend $10,725,451.64, which is the amount the school board has determined to be necessary for the ensuing fiscal year. It is estimated that this proposed budget, if approved, will result in education spending of $18,951.05 per equalized pupil. This projected spending per equalized pupil is 3.42% less than spending for the current year. Is there discussion under Article 3? Mr. Lambert.
I do appreciate the efforts of the board to try to explain these questions. I just wanted to point out, along with Mr. McAuliffe, that not only was the annual report not very available to people, but it does not even include a revenue section to this budget. So that's one thing that we ought to take into account. Neither is there an audit report for fiscal year 2020 in this report. If you look on the website, an audit report for 2019, but no audit for 2020. I think these are all complicating factors in approving a budget that the voters have very little information on.
Thank you, David. Mr. Pratt.
Thank you. Yeah, speaking on behalf of the audit, as this has been an ongoing issue throughout last year and this year, is that we just wrapped up the 2019 audit. And as most of you remember, the transition over to the statewide new finance system that was made by the state took us a lot longer because of its limitations in getting reports. As far as the 2020 audit, we just finished, and I can have my business director, Flora Pagan, speak more about the audit piece, but the audits have been finalized just last week, the final audits. And yes, we are behind, and we've already looked at for next year, starting the pre-audit as early as next week, because we can't, as administrative, we can't disagree that the audits were late. And so we're trying to adjust that timeline. So next year at this time, the audits will be done not during budget season and well before, so the town and the boards have the information they need ahead of time for the budget process. But as far as the audits go, I mean, as you could, if you were part of the town meeting earlier, I mean, with the school system wasn't the only entity that had difficulties and had to adjust a lot of auditing practices based on past practices. And that's what we had to do. There was a lot of work that went into changing the chart of accounts and getting us caught up from an old system into this new system that the state did. And having the audits later than any of us would like them, there was a lot of work that had to be done on the front end to get the information we needed to the auditors. And that took a little longer than expected because of the new transition to the state audit program. But I'd like to have Flora Pagan, if allowed by the voters, to speak also on behalf of the audits.
Flora Pagan, you have the floor.
Thank you. So first issue that we had with audits was that we were supposed to begin our audits on the middle of November, around the second week of November. And because of COVID reasons, the auditors could not come in. So they had to delay coming into the office all the way till December. They weren't able to come in till the second week of December, actually. As well, they were supposed to come in with a team of at least 4 of them, but because of COVID reasons, they couldn't do that as well. So only 2 of them were able to come in. So we had to adjust to these times, which are difficult times for everybody. And the audit process, we had to do everything paperless, scanned and emailed, and it took longer for them to as well evaluate each of our districts and be able to finalize everything that they needed for us. At this point, we are still waiting to finalize management letters, but the main and most important part for us was to submit every document that we needed to submit to the state, which was actually due the first week of February, and we did comply with that. I do apologize that, because of COVID and the difficult times, maybe auditors couldn't have everything set for us the way we wanted. But just being ahead this year, we are planning on beginning audits in the middle of August, and we discussed that already with the auditors. That way, we are one step ahead. We don't know how long it's going to take for everything to be in place with COVID, but as well, we did learn that now we could do everything as well remote. So it will be a better transition and an easier process. As well, we had to change a lot of the reports, the way that we used to submit reports, get reports from the new system, work with a lot of people with e-finance to train us and just help us out with gathering all those documents that we needed to print out for the system to provide for the auditors. So using the system as well was a challenge. The system did not provide the reports the way we wanted. Right now, a lot of you can understand exactly the reports that we have provided for you as budget-wise, but it's a report that comes from e-finance. It's not a report that we created, so we can only provide you what we have and the tools that we have. That is actually what is mandated by the state.
Jim McAuliffe, looks like your hand is still up. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I do. I'm taken back by a little bit by the number of kids in our Rockingham schools. Having served on the board back a few years ago, it's stunning to see how the numbers have dropped. My first question is, how many teachers did you eliminate in this year's budget to reflect the continuing drop in the head count of students?
At this moment, we haven't eliminated any faculty members. The reason for that is that even though maybe we have a less count of students, we still have students that are doing remote learning, and we had to adjust our staff to participate in remote learning, and students need actually more support being remote than sometimes being in the classroom. So when we evaluated our budget, the evaluation that we did was how could we adjust all the miscellaneous without adjusting faculty members because of the impact that COVID had in our students. Coming the new year, we don't know which one are going to be the needs of the students, and cutting faculty would not improve their education if students are going to have more needs.
Well, I think we all know from the outset that the children have suffered terribly during this COVID, and the fact that the expenses are only increasing and not decreasing it makes it tough on the taxpayer. Now, I did a quick calculation here, looking at your expense budget and the number of students that you have. It looks to me like it's like $23,500 per student. And because I counted 455 from the 3 buildings. And I think that I think the clear message that I want to make is to the board and to superintendent is that the education costs are too high. You're not managing the budget appropriately. I can honestly say, though, that your job is actually looks a little bit better when you look at the high school budget. The high school budget is even worse. they have actually exceeded the per pupil cap that the state has set. You're at least still under the cap as far as I can tell. But I think it's, my message is clearly that I'm voting against these budgets. I would encourage other taxpayers to stand up and send a message to you. And that is, look at, put the kids first, always put the children first. But you also have to be accountable to the taxpayer, and you should be. And with that, I will bid you adieu. Thank you.
All right, Chris Pratt, come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think between the boards and the administration have been very responsible with the budget this year, considering the crisis that we have been, the many unknowns that we have this year and will continue to have next year. And so with the way the budget is, I mean, there are cuts made across the board from the SU level to every single school when you get into looking at the budgets. And I think it is a difficult process when you have so many unknowns, not knowing what education is going to look like while you're doing it, but for next year. So cutting teachers was not the answer when we know the kids are going to need us more than ever. And we did take into consideration the burden on the taxpayers. If you take a hard look at the budget and the amount of money that was cut across all the budgets and at the SU level, I think the boards and the administration had a very difficult job this year of trying to prepare a budget. Right now, we don't know what an ideal budget looks like, but I'd have to say that right now, when you're looking at the budgets, there's no meat left on the bone on these budgets. We're doing as much as we can with what we have. And actually, if you look at the budget, we're looking to do more with less money. And we did take in consideration some taxpayers, but we also took in consideration the needs of our students and our teachers and what they need moving forward on an unknown time, not knowing what education is going to look like next year. We don't know if we're still going to be having to flip-flop back and forth between remote instruction. And it's really tough to budget for these unknowns. But I think, you know, the board, the administration would stand by what we're presenting to the taxpayers, because we did reduce the budget from quite a bit from every district. And we'll continue to look at it every year based on that, because we know the times are only going to get tougher and we're going to have to tighten the belts more. But not knowing what it looks like down the future, you know, we got to put the students in their education first, because they're going to need more. And we're already doing more with less, and it's a tough time for everyone. And these budgets, you know, we can't say that. At least we can say we did not increase the budgets this year. I mean, all the budgets, there've been significant cuts made, you know, across the board. So I do understand where taxpayers are coming from, but this wasn't easy on anybody this year. So, you know, I appreciate all the comments. I just wanted to express where I was coming as superintendent, and you know, the support from the board that we've had.
I would just say, Chris, that the all of these cuts that you've talked about, the expense budget is down by about $100,000. Now, I mean, goodness, $100,000 in terms of this budget. What were all the cuts you took? Can you tell us what all the cuts you took?
Well, Jim, if you look at if you start at the SU budget, there were tremendous cuts at the SU budget. And I think if you have time, that, you know, Flora can tell you, you know, exactly where a lot of the cuts came from the school as well as the SU budget.
Well, it's only 100,000.
Flora, can you review that?
Yes,
Then
so
please.
from the middle school, we did cut down $7,000, most likely. I'm just gonna round it. So it was $7,149 for salaries, miscellaneous, which is all the extra expenses for the school. We did cut down $17,989. For the Central Elementary, we did cut down on miscellaneous as well, $15,000. For Saxon River, we did cut down $4,560 for salaries and another $56,000 in miscellaneous. So the total cut, it was $163,320. That was the overall cut.
And the assessment for the SU?
in the budget. So that's it.
Hold on, Flora.
So assessment for the SU, we did cut $114,361. That is the assessment amount that we put for Rockingham. So we did cut down $114,000 for assessments.
In addition, that's not in addition. That's all in what you said before with regards to the Central and Saxons River and the middle school was included those cuts from the SU.
Yeah, so
But you
the
got-
overall amount that is including the assessment for the SU, which was $163,320,000.
But you have to take into consideration that the increases to the budget are coming from salaries and health benefits. Health benefits continue to go up. So if you look at how much the budgets went down, they still could have went up based on the huge increases we have in health insurance and what's going on at the state. So it's not apples to apples. You have, there's so many things that are out of our control. As you know, and you've been doing this for a long time, but health insurance over the past few years are skyrocketing compared to anything.
6.9% and up.
Go
So
ahead.
health insurance, the benefits did go up overall a 6.9%, and that's something that we did not have any control over.
And
So that is like,
Chris and Flora, I need to have one of you speak at a time. So, and Chris, if you're speaking, Flora, I need you to be not speaking and vice versa. So Flora, Flora, did you have additional comments?
so for benefits, we did have, which one the middle school has the highest volume of faculties, the benefits did go up $52,000. Another $5,000 for the Central Elementary and another $30,000 for Saxon River. But it is an overall 6.9% increase in benefits. That's something that we couldn't adjust or make any cuts on.
All right, any other comments from anybody who has not yet spoken on Article 3? Yes, Mr. McPhee.
Oh my God.
Douglas McPhee, Rockingham. Not having the report, I was shocked when I heard the number of students. Absolutely, and I am shocked. That middle school building, when I went there a long time ago, there was over 600 students in that building, and we were not crowded after the addition was put on. I don't know what, so it's dealing with a capacity in a third. I realize that things have changed a little bit, but and I don't know about Saxons River Central Elementary, but at some point there's got to be some long-term planning on closing down a building. The cost to maintain a building, 232 students versus 400, the cost to maintain the building becomes almost the same. It does increase, of course. So we've got to think about the future and what we're going to do. If we're not adding students, do we need 3 buildings? And more, actually. The program, I think in St. Charles, I don't know what that is, but I think we've got to think about maintaining 3 buildings if our student growth doesn't continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anybody else who has
I'd like to just briefly respond to that. This year was more or less survival. There was a brief conversation that was had early on in the school year, and that was a topic. So I personally look forward to having those conversations going forward as well. I think there could be something there, and it's worth discussing. So appreciate your comment.
Anyone else on Article 3?
I'd like to say something, please.
Yes, Jason?
So just wanted to say that none of this is easy, and the board members, we all want what you folks want and what the administration wants, and that's what's best for the kids. We have three new board members up here this year, and we're dealing with something that's never been done before, is a worldwide pandemic that we're trying to deal with. And our budget that was handed to us was well above 5%. And we worked, this board worked very hard on getting it down to level funded. And then we said, you know what, we can even do better than that. We said we wanted 1.5%. And we got that number that we needed. And then we were told if we go down any lower, it's going to affect salaries and jobs. So that's when we decided that, Mr. Pratt and Flora alluded to, that it'll affect jobs. So that's where the taxpayers are going to come in, and that's your choice. And if you vote it down, I don't think we have any problem going back and redoing the budget. So it is what it is. Thank you.
All right, any other comments under Article 3? If not, we're ready to take up Article 4. Article 4, to see if the Rockingham Town School District will vote to pay its district officers compensation in the amounts of chair, $700, board members, $600, and treasurer, $400. Is there any discussion under Article 4? Anybody on Zoom? All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the review of Articles 1 through 4. Keep in mind, we will be voting tomorrow on Articles 2, 3, 4, along with the school officers at the Australian ballot voting, which takes place at the Masonic Temple, 61 Westminster Street, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Please get out and vote and exercise your civic duty. Ms. Lambert? I'm being reminded, with masks on.
No,
Show up.
there's actually Article 5.
Article 5.
It's kind of tough to read the print.
My copy is so faint, I did not see Article 5. I see that, I'm sorry, Article 5. And this is an important article. And I'm going to have to wing it because I can't read my faint copy.
I bet Miss Applegate would read that for you.
Would you do that, Megan?
Article 5, excuse me, to transact any other business to be brought before the town district meeting.
And I would add, not involving the expenditure of funds. I don't know if it says that because I can't read it. Is there any discussion under Article 5?
I make a motion that we move to transact any other business to be brought before the town's district meeting.
Do I have a second? Is there any other action to be brought before the board? Yes, Gary Fox. Gary, what's that? No, we have a second down here. We just need to have you use a microphone.
Yeah, so Gary Fox, resident in Bellows Falls, and I'd just like to suggest, in light of a couple of comments, one of them being the number of students in consolidating schools, that the actual decline in population is a problem, and that efforts in town to improve and redevelop housing that is had deferred maintenance issues, business redevelopment efforts, efforts to improve our downtown and recruit population is something that will provide a healthier town than continuing and shrink. And it will additionally increase the grand list and help reduce taxes for folks. And so just another way of looking at it, and something that we should all consider for long-term sustainability. If we keep shrinking our population, it is problematic in other ways. And I want to thank the school board for just this year with COVID. I don't think it's a coincidence that we have such a low incidence rate, and our board has been very careful about how they proceeded, and with huge surges everywhere, Thanksgiving and Christmas. just, you know, the kids being in school, bringing stuff home to parents who I work very closely with. I really appreciate the effort you've made to keep us all safe there. So thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Any other comments under Article 5, other business? Hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to adjourn. Second? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much for putting up with our early technical difficulties, but I think once we got rolling, it worked out okay.